Welcome to Oncology Revolution, where science meets care to transform the cancer journey. We explore evidence-based strategies to enhance quality of life, promote longevity, and empower patients and professionals to thrive beyond cancer.
So today on the podcast, we have Dr. Lauren MacDonald. Dr. Lauren MacDonald is a UK-based psychiatrist, group retreat facilitator, and a psychedelic therapy guide. Her work bridges Western medicine and traditional healing approaches. Dr. Lauren was a clinical trials doctor at the Imperial College London, where she was involved in clinical trials and psychedelic therapy on groundbreaking studies exploring psilocybin-assisted therapy for different conditions. Her personal journey with stage 4 cancer has influenced her approach to healthcare, teaching her the importance of addressing the whole person, body, mind, heart, and spirit. This led her to co-found Essence Medicine, an organization offering psycho-spiritual support to individuals navigating life-threatening illness. With a background in psychology and medicine, Dr. Lauren is also trained in holistic body-mind practices like yoga, mindfulness-based stress reduction, nutritional medicine, compassionate inquiry, and MAPS MDA-assisted therapy training. Additionally, her journey has been guided by earth-based wisdom traditions and an ongoing commitment to learning and embracing diverse ways of knowing. Beautiful. Welcome, Dr. Lauren. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
So I would like to start this conversation by asking you, uh, in your view, why is it important that we start a deeper conversation about emotional and spiritual well-being, and particularly in the cancer context and for cancer patients?
Yeah, and I can really, I guess, speak to this both from a professional lens and then also my personal experience with stage 4 cancer, like you said. So maybe I'll start with the personal side of things, maybe to give a bit of context and why I'm so passionate about this. And it really comes from, I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 29 years old. I'm now 40 years old, so it's been a bit of a journey. And over a number of years, the cancer spread. It came back several times, and I ended up with a stage 4 diagnosis when I was 31. And during that time, I had many surgeries, and I was really well looked after by my medical team in terms of my physical body. And I was just so aware that my emotional health, my well-being, my spiritual sense of self, that kind of wider context, all those other selves that we all have, wasn't really acknowledged. There was no additional support. I mean, this was obviously some years ago now, and I think things have really improved in the space in oncology, and there's much more kind of complementary therapies available now. But I just was so amazed that I would go to these oncology appointments and no one would really ask me how I was doing, other than just, a brief, "Hey, how are you?" But I would just give the standard, "Oh, I'm fine, thank you." And you don't really pause to check your heart and say, "Actually, I'm really not okay. I'm really struggling here and I'm really overwhelmed and I'm really scared and I'm waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning, petrified that I'm going to die and I feel desperately alone." I didn't share any of that with anyone. So I'd just say, "Oh, I'm fine," and then get on with the next round of chemotherapy infusion or scan results, whatever I was there to kind of receive. And it was only on the other side of my cancer experience, so 4 years after my first diagnosis, when I was finally given a remission, a kind of no evidence of disease status, that I really realized how much of an impact the whole journey had had on me. And for so many people with cancer, you kind of get this remission status if you're fortunate enough to get there. But even if you're not, like, you can obviously live well with cancer as well. But this is where that difference between healing and curing comes in. And I really believe that you can be healed or experience a depth of healing even if you're not cured. And then equally, you can be cured and really not be healed. And I think that's where I found myself. I was really still very anxious about the cancer returning, still grappling with existential anxiety and that huge question around my mortality and what does it all mean, life, death, these big existential questions. So it really took me down a path of exploring spirituality and other practices, yoga, meditation, just being outside in nature. And then also just becoming more connected to my inner world and starting to process some of the emotions, the trauma that I've been really carrying while I've been in survival mode for all those years, but also a lot of trauma work and really through the body as well. So often people experience talk therapy, which can be incredibly helpful on one level, but I was really aware that I was holding so much in my body. So it's been a real journey of, like I said, yoga was a wonderful tool for me. It just really helped me to get into my body and out of my mind. But dance, movement, there's a practice called TRE, trauma release exercises or tension release exercises, and just really trying to shake it, quite literally shake it out. And so, just all of these tools and practices came into my life really through my own healing journey. And then I've just realized that you don't have to be going through a cancer journey to kind of find these tools helpful in day-to-day life. I think in terms of prevention and looking after our nervous systems and really thriving and flourishing in life, we could all do with paying some attention to our emotional world, our spiritual world, as well as the mind, which gets so much attention, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because even when we talk about lifestyle oncology, which is sort of the field we move into in our organization, we sort of um, tend to focus on nutrition and exercise, and we really forget these such an important pillar, which is emotional well-being. And it's interesting that in lifestyle, in the lifestyle medicine world, we still call it stress management, but it's really much broader than that, right? It's really taking care of your whole emotional well-being. So
And I definitely started. I think the nutritional piece was the first area I explored. I think for so many people that is the way that they go first when maybe they experience a diagnosis like cancer. And of course, I was really paying attention to what I was eating. I was trying to get plenty of sleep. I was trying to be outside in nature. I was meditating. And then it was almost like, oh, there's another layer to explore here. And it comes to that mind-body connection piece of, yes, you can really tend to your body, your physical needs, but actually if you're ignoring your emotional, spiritual, kind of the more heart-centered aspects of yourself, then you're really neglecting a big part of the picture, I think. And it's only just really beginning to be talked about.
yeah, absolutely. So you started with, delving already in your personal experience. So I'll carry on that. And I really wanted to break down your experience because you were diagnosed with melanoma, right?
Yeah.
And then you had it progressed to stage 4. And for those listening, there's no stage 5, so it was really as bad as it could go. And I tell me about that particular time frame since you were diagnosed until you were actually given, death sentence. And how was that time for you? What were the challenges? How did you cope with those, etc.?
So I was diagnosed at 29. I was a newly qualified junior doctor myself. And I had noticed a new lump on just above my knee on my right leg. Tiny, small pimple almost. And I watched it for a few weeks and thought, oh, this isn't something not quite right about it. It didn't have the normal with melanoma or with, moles. People always say, look out for the A, B, C, D, E of kind of change. And it didn't have any of those. It was just a strange little red bump. So something in my, I think, intuition took me to the doctor. And unfortunately at that time, and I think because it didn't present as a kind of barn door melanoma, the doctor said, "Oh, it's nothing to worry about." Actually diagnosed me with something else, a venous hemangioma, and reassured me. And I think if I'm truly honest with myself, there was still a niggle that something wasn't quite right. But of course, you hear that and you're like, "Oh, okay, phew, there's nothing to worry about." And then there was unfortunately a 6-month period where I didn't return. The lump didn't change particularly. And then one day I knocked it and it started bleeding and it just bled and bled and bled. And I was actually due to go to work at the hospital that day. I couldn't go to the hospital because it quite literally had that much blood supply that it wasn't stopping. So obviously went straight back to have a review, and then everything just happened so quickly. Had the biopsy, had a wide local excision surgery a few days later, and the team said, hopefully they'd caught it early enough. But this, again, I just had this intuitive sense. And I think obviously also with our medical training, sometimes it's great to have this additional knowledge and other times it's petrifying. And I just had this sense like, oh, that's been there for 6 months. And it's obviously got such a good blood supply. So I tried to go back to life. I was working, and at the same time, there was just this ever-present feeling of it's only a matter of time until it comes back. And 6 months later, I developed some pain in my groin on the right side, and I ended up having an ultrasound and then a biopsy, and one of the lymph nodes had cancer cells in it. So I had a groin dissection on that side, and they removed 13 lymph nodes. And then they had to go back and remove a few more, so I had another surgery. And in between all of this, I was trying to go back to work, but it's so hard when you're going through this journey and I really was, in hindsight, in survival mode and compartmentalizing and suppressing all of it and just trying to get on. Obviously, yeah, now I really wish I had all the tools at my disposal and understood how important it was to be processing along the way. But I just went, yeah, so let's try and survive and get through this. And then I had a year I was having CT scans every 3 months for surveillance. And then in October 2015, I had a scan that showed I had metastases to my lung, to my adrenal gland, to a kind of almost like my breast tissue up in my right breast. It was more kind of in the muscle, really. And at that point, they just said, look, we could keep doing surgeries, but obviously I really felt like cat and mouse, that we were just constantly chasing and not really getting to the root cause of it. And alongside this, I've been doing, all of the additional nutrition and juicing and taking supplements and meditating and practicing yoga. I trained as a yoga teacher during that time. So I'd become so passionate about the practice, just with supporting me. And at that point, I was told, unfortunately, I was not eligible for any clinical trials. And we know that melanoma, unfortunately, doesn't respond particularly well to traditional chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So they said that probably isn't worth doing. So I was literally told just before Christmas 2015, okay, we don't know exactly what the plan is. Kind of hold tight. Potentially there might be a clinical trial that you might be eligible for in 2016. Let's see how quickly the cancer spreads over the next few months. And amazingly, and I really do feel that I'm like the luckiest unlucky person in a way, is a nice approved immunotherapy, so pembrolizumab. And I was able to be one of the first patients in the UK to have it, not as part of a clinical trial. And during that time, in those kind of liminal months where I really wasn't sure what was going to happen, I'd been researching and I found out a lot about gut health. This was 2015. Not many people would talk about the microbiome back then. And some initial studies in mice models had said that actually if you diversify your gut microbiome before immunotherapy, that you have potentially a better chance of survival. And I knew that immunotherapy might be on the cards, so I really did everything to support my gut health during that time. And I was told, in the January that I would be able to have pembrolizumab, and that I had about 20% chance of it working. And amazingly, it worked so quickly for me. And I don't know, whether that was just luck, whether it's genetics, whether it was that I'd been going so hard on my kind of gut health and really looking after myself. But within 4 months, I was in remission. And it really was amazing, especially because the tumors on my chest wall, on my kind of upper breast, they were very visible by that time. And you could, if I was wearing a low-cut top or a swimsuit, you could really see the tumors. So it was a constant reminder that the cancer was there. And they had a good blood supply by that point. And over the course of a few months, I just watched them melt away. And it really was, every few days I'd look down and be like, wow, they're shrinking, they're like dissolving. So it was just such a miracle, to go from that extent level of disease, being told there really isn't anything we can do right now, to by July 2016 being in remission. It was incredible. And then it was the kind of, okay, now what? If I have managed to become, that survivorship chapter, how am I going to actually process what's just happened?
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. It's such a it's such a interesting trajectory. And also, I know you talk a lot about these moments of specifically the moment where you actually didn't know what was going to come next. And we have lots of people who come to us and are actually in this situation. Uh, what can you tell us about, you know, coping and really trying to, I don't know if this is the right expression, but make the most of that period since you are living with such uncertainty? What can we do to actually be able to move forward even though we have such a terrible diagnosis?
Hmm. Yeah, I guess it just to say a name, it is so, so hard when you find yourself in that place. There's no, I don't want to kind of try and spread toxic positivity and,
Yeah.
gratitude, daily gratitude practice will make it all okay. Because, of course, it's really, really hard. And yet, there were things that really helped me. And for me, it was as simple as I had to actually move back from where I'd been working as a doctor, because obviously I wasn't working anymore. By that time, it'd been a few years. I wasn't getting any sick pay. So I had to move back in with my parents, which again was quite hard to go from losing my, just being 30 years old, feeling independent, and then suddenly almost regressing back to that childlike state of being, I'm back with my parents being looked after. And obviously so grateful to have had that and actually to have had that time with them. But they had a dog, so it meant I was able to walk the dog twice a day, and I would go out for an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. And it was so healing for me to just walk to, they fortunately live near the ocean, so to just have that ocean breeze, to be on the land, to be so mindful, and also to sometimes cry and to really connect with my sadness and my fear. And I think for so many people, when you go through a cancer journey, there's a sense of like maybe not wanting to show too much emotion because it's obviously not just you that's going through it. It's like your friends and family, and they're trying to be strong for you, but equally you're trying to, for so many people, I think, be strong for them because you don't want to upset them or worry them. So I definitely was holding it all together, seemingly quite well from the outside, but inside, obviously, I was really scared, really anxious, really worried. So just having that time on my own to really be in touch with that, my truth and how I was really feeling, and release it. But I think nature is just so incredibly healing to be outside and to make sure that I did get outside, because looking back, I don't know whether sure necessarily say I was depressed. I think it was more I was in existential anxiety, and it does have a different flavor. It was it was really existential. So the nature of peace was really key. Journaling I did find helpful, listening to various apps, yoga nidras if I was struggling to sleep, but especially when I was waking up in the middle of the night, feeling very scared, very lonely, very uncertain. Putting on a yoga nidra was very helpful. And just trying to stay in touch with friends and family, because it is incredibly isolating and it feels so lonely. So I don't think I did the best job of that. I think there was definitely a sense of, I must get through this. I don't want to burden anybody else. Now I would think I would hopefully do it a different way. But at that time, I was definitely armored up in a way and was like, okay, so I mind. But yeah, leaning on friends and family when I could. And and I think just naturally the experience opened me up to spirituality. And by that, I mean just having a belief in something greater than myself, a trust in the universe, a trust that whatever path this took, whether I got better or whether I didn't get better, just having to surrender and try and let go of control, because you can't control it really. You can do things obviously to look after yourself, whether it's, like we said, the various lifestyle measures, but ultimately there is a sense of surrender that has to come. Otherwise, you just feel absolutely paralyzed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an important point as well, because as I was mentioning before, there's so many people who actually um, have a need, and I think we all have that need to control our life to some degree, like do the right diet, do the right exercise, make sure we're meditating every day. Um, and yeah, I guess my question here is, how do we learn to take care of ourselves and at the same time surrender, like you're saying?
Mm. Yeah, what you just said reminded me that when I was first diagnosed, I couldn't walk past a supplement shop without essentially going in, because I was doing so much research about all these different potential supplements and powders, and did I need another green powder to add to my juice, So my cupboards were absolutely full to the brim. And I'm sure it couldn't have been good for me taking that many. But also it caused me so much stress, because there was this sense of, if I don't buy that, if I don't add that in, that in some way I'm missing my chance to get better. And it was really overwhelming and really stressful to actually be quite strict with myself. I became a vegan for a year, and my diet was, no sugar. I was missing out on a lot of pleasure because I became really strict. And I do feel that that was probably part of the process I had to go on, that journey.
Mm.
But with time, I just realized that actually I also needed to just kind of let myself soften a little bit, let myself live, enjoy pleasure. That's such an important part of life, and to not be so restrictive. So I think it's fine balance between, yes, looking after ourselves and doing what we know is good for us, and also not being so controlling and strict that we kind of forget and miss out on the joys of life as well. And that surrender piece, it sounds so easy. I always think the word surrender it sounds so passive, like, oh, I just surrender. And actually that's hard. So sometimes I just say, how can you soften rather than surrender? Or how can you let go a little bit? Because I
Right.
think maybe is a good place to start. And I think surrender means different things to different people, but for me, it definitely was that sense of, I can only do so much, and really trying to trust the universe and trying to trust that there's a bigger energy at play, a bigger picture, even when it feels painful and I don't understand it, and I'm angry and upset. And, of course, sometimes you say, oh, why me? Why is this happening? And sometimes we just don't know. And it's a great mystery, and we're living in this great mystery. But yeah, I think it's a daily practice, and I still struggle now, in daily life. I might not have active disease now, but I think surrendering to life is always a positive thing, to not have to control everything, and whether it's work or family relationships, just having a little bit more trust in this world, in this universe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would like to ask you a question about, stress and tension. You mentioned the way you were expressing your emotions when you were going on the walks as well, and this is different for everyone. But in your experience, I know you were sort of exposed already to a lot of stress, and you had a sense of having lost your way somehow before your diagnosis. And I would really like you to expand on that, because I guess it's something that I hear so often in cancer survivors, and particularly young ones, and people who are always doing all uh, the by the book things to be healthy, but still this piece of stress and not being aligned with yourself being something that is also very relevant for your well-being and health overall.
Mm. It is interesting when you look back. There's a famous Steve Jobs quote that says you can only connect the dots looking backwards, not forwards. And I really feel I can resonate with that, because prior to my diagnosis, as I said, I just qualified as a junior doctor, and I had found medical school interesting. I'd loved learning about the body and the mind, but I'd studied psychology before. And really, I think my interest was much more in those realms, the psychological realms. So when I started working as a junior doctor, obviously such a difficult job, so demanding, takes so much. It really is a vocation. And working in the NHS, I found really, really hard. And there was a sense of that feeling like a square, what's the expression? Square peg, round hole? Not queer, that's right. And I hadn't obviously gone on this huge journey into holistic medicine, integrative medicine, lifestyle medicine, but I was still more interested in those areas. I had an inkling that there was more to health and well-being than what we were doing in this kind of very bio psychosocial model, but really more biological than anything, and quite reductionist as well. So I was feeling really stressed and overwhelmed and out of alignment with my purpose, that sense of like, why am I here? Hadn't quite found how I wanted to work. And I think for many people, definitely for myself, when you're not out of alignment in your work, it does become, such a central part of your week, of your life, that when that's out of alignment, everything just doesn't quite fit and flow. So it's really quite amazing to have got to where I've got to now, where I do look back and honestly have such gratitude for the journey I've been on. Um, I don't know whether if someone said, "Oh, I could take that away, what happened to you? I could take that all away," whether I would want it to be taken away, because there's been such rich lessons and learnings and wisdom, and it really has put me on a path that is so deeply aligned with my soul, with my kind of, whatever it is, whatever language you want to use. But I feel so grateful, really, to have found this work. I'm obviously working now in psychedelic therapy and with psycho-spiritual practices and more with the somatic side of things, the body. And it's just such a beautiful area of work, and really brings me alive. I feel so passionate about it. So I think it's amazing, really, how these very difficult life challenges, whether it's illness or other challenges, can actually sometimes be such a gift on the other side. But when you're in it, of course, you do not feel like it's a gift, or very few people, I think, do. And it's that post-traumatic growth that can come as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would love to talk a little bit about your work. the work you do now, which you end up working with lots of cancer survivors as well that just come to you, basically. And tell us a bit about your work at the moment, the retreats you host, because I think they're really amazing. Yeah, all of that.
Yeah, it's been a meandering path. I'm definitely still kind of exploring and finding my way, just following the energy and really trusting. But after I went into remission, the reason I've ended up working in the psychedelic field is that as I mentioned, I was still really struggling on the other side of the cancer diagnosis with anxiety, fear of recurrence, really grappling with my mortality. And I'd had a bit of an awakening of sorts. I think when you come face to face with your mortality, there is a sense of like, wow, life is not finite. Our life is not infinite. We have a limited amount of time, and actually life is so precious. And that can be amazing. That can be such a gift and an awakening, but at the same time, it can be quite confronting as well. So I ended up stumbling upon a TED talk by the late Roland Griffiths, who was a wonderful researcher at Johns Hopkins in the States. And this was in 2016, 2017. And he had published a study looking at psilocybin therapy for cancer patients who are experiencing existential anxiety and depression and just really struggling. And I came across this video and watched it one day and suddenly just realized that this was exactly what I'd been looking for. This was almost a missing piece, or at least I felt that it could be the missing piece. I was already doing all the other holistic things, but hadn't quite got to addressing the kind of bigger existential fear and the trauma as well that I'd been through. So I took myself on a legal retreat in the Netherlands. You can go to Holland and experience psilocybin truffles legally, and truly had the most incredible, life-changing experience there. And not only experienced such depth of healing myself, I honestly left that retreat feeling so much lighter, just a sense of, even if the cancer comes back, even if I do die, which of course we will at some point, all of us, but there's a sense of, oh, my body will die, but my essence, my spirit will continue. And I had such a beautiful psilocybin journey on that retreat that it really made me realize this is something I would love to bring to other cancer patients or other people facing life-threatening illness. So I came back to the UK. I decided to study psychiatry. So I started on the psychiatry training. And then after some years, also started volunteering and assisting on psilocybin retreats in the Netherlands, which was an amazing experience, a bit of an apprenticeship of sorts. And then got a job at Imperial College London at the Centre for Psychedelic Research. And I was there for 2 years working full-time on the psilocybin trials and also the DMT, which is the active aspect of ayahuasca. And they weren't unfortunately running any trials for people with cancer at that time, but it just really felt that it was a good time to go and get some experience, to try and build the relationship with psilocybin as a therapy guide, to really start to understand, okay, what's really happening here and how best can we support people in a safe setting and help them to get the most out of these experiences. And I left Imperial at the end of 2023, and then all of last year, so 2024, I just went deep into the retreat world and facilitated a lot of retreats, mainly in the Netherlands, just again to gain some more experience. And that I have such a love for the group space. I think especially, well, really everybody I think is often quite disconnected. We're often disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from our communities, from nature. So just coming together in group, and every group has its own special magic. I really believe that different people come together for different reasons. And then alongside that, I set up Essence Medicine, which was really born out of meeting a wonderful palliative care nurse, Rosie, who was feeling quite disillusioned with the direction palliative care was going. she said over the years she'd really found that it'd become much more focused on medicine and drugs and less so on the psychospiritual side that she really felt was important from a nursing perspective. But obviously I had the lived experience as well. So we were running online programs for some time, and we haven't actually got round to it yet, but the aim is to run a retreat in the Netherlands specifically for people with life-threatening illness, either with active disease or with in remission. And in the meantime, a lot of the retreats I run, I think because of what I speak about, what I'm known for, people know my background. Often I do get people with cancer coming on the retreats as well, which is really, really wonderful. It kind of makes it feel like I've come full circle to be able to support people in that space and gift them the healing and the peace and acceptance that so often comes when you journey with psilocybin in these spaces. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. And you touched on some really key points, and I because I have a personal experience with cancer as well. We actually have some similarities in our background as well. Um, and I really felt when I was diagnosed and then going through treatment that you really uh, disconnect from your body at some stage, because the body stops being a safe place, which is, either because of cancer or because of the treatments or both. And um, I would love you to expand on this notion of how, yoga as well and mindfulness, these practices that you also use, can also help reestablish the link and the connection to your body after treatment. And yeah, we'd love to hear your experience on that.
Yeah, I'm really pleased you brought this up actually, because it's such an important piece. And I know for myself that for not everybody feels safe in their body, but for many of us, we do have a sense of safety in our body and a sense of home. And for me, I know when I was diagnosed, especially when I was given the stage 4 diagnosis, I was aware that I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't feel my body was kind of against me rather than like giving me home and a sense of security and safety. And I do think there was a slight dissociation that happened. I mean by that, it's when your psyche almost, as a way of protecting you from the enormity of the situation, you almost come out of your body. You kind of, you're not quite in your body, and it is a way of protecting you. And other people have it with different traumas. It doesn't have to be an illness, but I feel looking back that I was probably quite dissociated for a few months, going through the motions, kind of waiting to hear if there was going to be any treatment for me. And the practices that you kind of have touched on, whether it's yoga, whether it's gentle movement, dance, and just kind of coming back into your body, was a real process for me. And like I said, kind of using the body to actually process the trauma as well, so it didn't stay stuck in my body. And it's interesting, I worked on the psilocybin therapy for anorexia nervosa trial, and that was one of the key aspects of that trial. Is it was so interesting that many of the participants, it was like during the time we worked with them, it was actually a journey back into their bodies, realizing there was a body below the neck, and that the psilocybin therapy helped with that. But obviously there's all these amazing other somatic practices as well to really, come back to a sense of safety and home. And I personally had EMDR therapy. I don't know if you've heard of that. I'm desensitization therapy, which I think is the most amazing tool for anyone who's gone through a traumatic experience. But I had that actually several years after I'd gone into remission. But it really helped to process some of the key moments that had caused me to probably dissociate and to not really be able to be in my body. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, for people diagnosed with stage 4 cancer who are not in remissions, is it still possible to get this connection with the body and feel safe?
I really think it is. And I guess I can obviously only speak from my experience, but I would say that I was able to get there before I went into remission. Because as I said, I did start the immunotherapy, but then there was around 3 or 4 months before this tumor started melting away where they actually got bigger. And I now know that it's something called pseudo progression, where actually your immune system's flooding into the tumors to attack. But obviously, it can look quite scary when these tumors are suddenly growing bigger. And I was still able during that time to feel calmer in my body, feel kind of a sense of safety, and extend compassion and kindness to my body, because I think that's a real key piece. It's like we can feel that our body, as I mentioned a moment ago, like is really against us. But it's like, okay, how can I befriend my body and how can we work together rather than seeing it as something that's attacking you? But I definitely kind of flitted between the two. I think it's not, of course there was times when I was like, oh, what's going on? Like my body's really kind of against me. But it was that, I think it's again a daily practice. And it's so easy to just be in the mind and let the thoughts spiral, and it can be terrifying. But it's like, okay, there's actually a body here and there's a heart here and there's a spirit, a soul here as well. And trying your best to stay connected to those parts of self as well.
Right. Yeah. And I would like to go back to this piece of trauma, and and just to clarify for listeners, why is it important to address the body? And because most people think about trauma and think about talk therapy or something like very cognitive. And I was wondering, as a psychiatrist as well, if you could just let us know, why is it important to address the body? Why is trauma so connected with this sense of disconnection from the body as well? Yeah.
So I think it's Gabor Mate who says that the trauma is not the thing that happens to you, but it's how your body and your psyche responds. And so for some people, you could go through the same incident, the same illness as somebody else, and yet your nervous system, your body, your psyche would not respond in the same way. So it is really an individual experience. So you have to really look at, how has the person responded to the thing that's happened to them? And for many people, when they experience a trauma, there's that survival mode, it's that fight, flight, freeze response. And depending on kind of how long it goes on for or how maybe severe it was in the moment, really depends on where you maybe get stuck. So for some people, it can be that fight, flight. And for other people, it's more of a freeze and a dissociation and feeling, very out of your body, very kind of not connected to yourself. And there's many tools that can start to address that. There's a theory called the polyvagal theory you may have heard of. And there's, the different ways of, okay, depending on where the person is, whether they're in flight or whether they're in freeze or become so numb. It's like, how do we get them back slowly into the state they need to be in to feel regulated, to really, to feel safe, to feel regulated, to feel present in their body. And the various different tools like the parasympathetic nervous system. So one part of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic, there's lots of things you can do that really helps that, whether it's, humming, singing, various different types of movement. But those kind of tools can be very helpful on the trauma experience. But again, so can EMDR, and there's a lot there. It's a lot to talk about in one question.
Yeah, trauma is such a big thing and a big field, and developing fast as well. So it's beautiful, and it's such an interesting topic as well. Absolutely. And I would love to touch as well on, because I know in your retreats you use also some shamanic practices. And for some people, this can look like something very woo-woo or out there. But I would really like to bring that, to explain that in a concept that everyone can understand, because it's really not nothing special or nothing to be afraid of. So would really love you to explain and expand on that.
Mm. Yeah, this shamanic training that I did last year, I feel like I'm cautious to say that I'm a shamanic practitioner, because I'm really not. I'm very much at the beginning of
Yeah.
this exploration. And my teacher actually said, you can never call yourself a shaman, because that's, unless you're from a Siberian tribe, that's actually where that word originates from. So, you get all these people saying I'm a shaman, and actually, for many people, they're not, unless they're from an indigenous tribe where they've been kind of maybe trained from the age of 10, decades and decades of training. So yeah, it's one of those things that came on my radar. I really think because working in the psychedelic space, but very much in a clinical setting, I felt called a few years ago to go and experience, okay, what is it like to actually go to the heart of where these practices have come from, Central and South America, for the most part. Obviously, we have our own shamanic practices in Europe as well, but I was curious to go and see, okay, these wisdom keepers that have been holding this knowledge for, thousands and thousands of years, how do they work with the medicines? How do they work with plant medicines? And it really is around um, just like earth-based wisdom, like ritual and ceremony. And I feel that, especially in the UK, we've really lost touch with those ancient rituals, and we've lost our ancient way, really. The elders, we don't have that passed down in the same way as other indigenous traditions. So I'm just really curious about it. And it's not necessarily that we need to appropriate or copy other cultures, but it's amazing to just open up to other ways of knowing and being and connecting with spirit. And then also come back to our culture and say, oh, but what about, here in the UK, we have the Celtic tradition, there's the Druids, I know, ancient Greece, different cultures. Every culture has its own indigenous um, wisdom, really, to explore. And so often it is shamanic in nature. It's about the land, it's connecting with nature, it's connecting with the seasons, really, the different festivals at spring and autumn. So there's such a beautiful world, really, an ancient world to explore and learn more about. And I feel in some ways it's just another step on my journey of healing. It's like this shamanic piece. So yeah, I completed just a foundational training last year, and it was wonderful, just really being with the land and singing and learning to play the shamanic drum and shamanic drum journeys. They can actually take you to quite an altered state as well. So obviously psychedelics can do that, but there's so many other ways to experience an altered state of consciousness.
Mm. Yeah. And is this a way of connecting to, by connecting with nature and the ritual and all these practices, is this a way of connecting to ourselves as well and calming your nervous system? So I guess my question is, what's the impact of all these practices on our physiology, our well-being, and etc.? Yeah.
I think that there are some studies happening right now. There's a really interesting field of research that's really looking at what's been going on in indigenous cultures, and what happens in ceremony and how does it actually affect the physiology of the body. There's researchers actually looking at the cortisol, for example, before and after ceremony, and like, okay, is there actually an effect, or the epigenetic changes that happen as well, which is amazing to actually have science then actually maybe proving what indigenous wisdom has said for so long. Um, but yeah, feel like for me, like personally, all I could say is there's something that happens in my nervous system when I feel more connected to something beyond myself, whether it's nature, whether it's, the earth, whether it's the cosmos. And it almost takes the pressure off myself. I feel
Yeah.
that deep connection. My nervous system regulates. There's something about if you take your shoes and socks off and walk on the earth, we know that that's really beneficial for us, that actually that helps regulate us, to help us ground. And when we lie on the grass and watch the clouds, straight away your nervous system just drops, that parasympathetic drop that we feel. So the science is going to be really interesting the more we study this area. And just actually, because intuitively we know that it's helping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I guess we and I'm a researcher as well, and we like scientific evidence to support our beliefs and claims, but at some stage there's really simple and intuitive things that, yes, it's great to have the research backing that up, but at the same time it, right? You don't really need the research to be able to implement practices that calm and ground your nervous system, right?
Exactly. And so often it's just getting back to basics. It's, we live in such a consumerist, capitalist society for the most part. And actually, when you take it back to basics, actually, that's where the healing happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'd love to go to this topic of survivorship. And when I'm talking about survivorship, is really when you finish treatments, you're in remission. And we're actually starting a survival program, like a program for survivors. And I was interested in discussing as well, because survivorship can be such a time of vulnerability, and you touched on that. And many people ask us, when will I go back to normal? Or what, I don't feel normal. I'm not the old me anymore. So does it go back to the way it used to be? What should be what should we be expecting in survivorship, I guess, would be my question. But also, is it normal when we feel lost after cancer treatment?
I'm so happy to hear that you're setting up a survivorship program, because it's the very thing I needed when I needed so much really during the experience, during the journey, but also on the other side. So it is really wonderful to hear that these kind of initiatives, these projects are being set up. And like you said, with your own experience of cancer, I imagine that you also realized that actually that was something that might have benefited.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, mm, to your question of do you ever go back to normal, the so-called normal?
Yeah.
What is normal? I definitely grappled with that. There was a sense of, and there was an expectation, I think, from friends and family, from definitely the medical profession. I did feel like I'd been spat out the other side and was like, okay, off you go. Back you go to work, back you go to life, pick up where you left off. And of course, in that 4-year period, it was so much had changed within me. I'd gone through such a huge initiation, and I wasn't the same person. I felt very broken, to be truly honest. I felt exhausted. I can't even remember, to be honest, if I had any kind of big celebration the day I found out there's no evidence of disease. I think I just was so tired. I just slept and then kind of maybe had a nice dinner with some friends or family. I really can't remember. So it's interesting that I didn't have this big party, which I think some people do, but I really wasn't in that headspace. And I think now what I would say, and again, I can only speak to my own experience really, and of course other people that I've spoken with who've had similar experiences, but it's not a case of trying to get back to where you were, but really just looking at all the gifts that have come from it, but also recognizing how difficult it was and really being compassionate with yourself and taking it slow and not rushing to go back to work. Or, if you're financially stable, that's obviously great. Obviously, some people have to rush back. But it's like, okay, how can I return, but acknowledging that I am a different person. I've probably got a different nervous system. I probably still have a lot of healing to do to feel really regulated and safe. And at the same time, there's such opportunity for growth. And we talk about post-traumatic growth and really getting to know yourself better as well, and really questioning, am I living a life that's aligned, that's full of purpose and meaning, and without putting too much pressure on yourself? Because I think that's the other thing. Suddenly you can feel like, oh wow, life's so precious and I've got to do everything and make the most of every moment. And of course, that's not real life. We all have responsibilities and not every moment's going to be beautiful and precious. But it's about just working out, okay, how can I navigate this liminal space? Because I think it is a liminal space, and it takes however long it takes to regain your footing and to feel steady and grounded again. I definitely didn't feel that way for quite a long time, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was definitely some amazing gifts for me in it, and I share sometimes that I had the most incredible, terrifying evening the first night of my diagnosis. And bearing in mind, this was after that 6-month delay. And then I found out, okay, you have malignant melanoma. We don't know. You have to have a CT scan tomorrow. We're not sure how much, like the extent of the disease. So I obviously went to bed that night thinking I was absolutely going to be riddled with cancer. And I lay in bed all night long, and I can only describe it as some kind of download or awakening. And it was very psychedelic in its nature, but these kind of thoughts came through, these questions, and it was like, okay, if this has been my life to date, if I am going to die soon, like, have I loved enough? And have I let myself be loved enough? Has the world been a better place simply by me being alive? And like, am I leaving some kind of legacy? And obviously that doesn't have to be something huge. Your legacy doesn't have to be this huge thing, but like, have I just had a little bit of impact here to make the world a better place? Even if it's just, connecting with loved ones or people, smiling at someone on the street. So it was really amazing to have these almost guiding life principles downloaded to me then. And I do revisit them quite often, even now, like to try and keep me on track. And sometimes it's simple as like, am I loving deeply and widely enough? And am I also opening myself up to love? I really feel that a big part of my journey has been around love. Love for self, love for others, love for this world in all its messiness and complicated various implications. But yeah, but when I was in, of course, I did not feel I was getting all these amazing gifts.
Of course, yeah, it's something that he gets once you look back, as you said, absolutely. Yeah,
Can I ask, I'm just so curious if you don't mind, just you had cancer and you've been through this. I would love also to hear from your perspective what has helped you either during your journey when you're having treatment or even, in survivorship as well.
yeah. Thank you for asking. So when I feel like my story is very similar to yours in a sense that I was feeling quite disconnected from myself when I was diagnosed as well. Yeah, I was just not sure about my professional path. Also, like feeling I didn't fit in the conventional medical system because I was too sensitive, too bothered by people's problems, to be honest. So I was really having a hard time seeing myself as a conventional doctor in a conventional system. And then I ended up doing research, and I knew I didn't want to do research for the rest of my life as well. So I was also in this limbo when I was diagnosed. Um, and yeah, I felt like it was too much stress. I had been working like crazy shifts in the years before. And um, I really felt, as I heard you saying before, that it was too much for my body to cope with during that stage. And so when I was diagnosed, I actually had a moment of all right, see, this makes sense, right after all of this.
I felt exactly the same, by the way. I really felt that too.
Yeah, so it wasn't like yeah, big surprise, or of course it was a surprise, but at the same time it wasn't. So it kind of made sense really quickly. And yeah, so I was finishing my yoga teacher training when I was diagnosed, and I was living in Australia. And at that stage, I was thinking, I really want to practice yoga, but there's no classes for me while I'm going through treatments. And that led me to do a teacher training on specifically in oncology yoga to be able to practice while I was recovering. And that was very helpful. But I guess, I really took my time with myself as well, like you were saying. And I took my time to discover what made sense to me, what things I really wanted to study, how I wanted to um, sort of cultivate my relationships, what type of relationships I wanted to cultivate. Um, I had to learn, and it's still a process. I had to learn to say no, which was really hard for me. Um, so all these different things that are still sort of, I feel like I'm still learning, but yeah, I shifted so much at the same time. So yeah, yoga was a big thing. And then I was in lots of retreats as well that helped me connect with my body, connect with nature. Uh, Dancing was something that I was doing like quite often as well, just intuitive dancing to express emotions, activating my voice. Um, yeah, I feel massage. I think it was so many different modalities that helped me through that time and still help me today to kind of feel more balanced and grounded after my journey. But I also feel that you learn quite a bit in a short period of time, but then you really need to remind yourself to keep practicing these things that are so good for you, because very quickly your life you can be rushed again or doing things that you don't want to do. So yeah, I guess that has been my experience until today.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. Yeah, there's definitely so much like overlap in our experience.
Yeah, yeah,
You've just reminded me actually of something just to say as well. That I'm kind of grappling with at the moment is I in this survivorship chapter, there was this real sense that I will really want to help other people with cancer get access to psychedelic therapy and psychedelic retreats and somatic therapies and all these beautiful practices that have really helped me to heal and grow. And at the same time, I'm aware that I've almost put so much energy into it that I've gone into a very masculine way of being in the world where you're striving and on all the time, busy. And yes, I do still make time for some of the practices, but a lot of them have fallen by the wayside. And I'm really now on a process and a bit of a journey of trying to come back more into balance. It's like, okay, I want to be of service and this legacy piece feels important. I do want to help other people, but not at the detriment to myself and not like losing myself in this work and being too in service, if you can almost be too in service. So I've taken the next 3 months off actually, which feels really good. You just mentioned boundaries and saying no. And I do have a tendency to say, yes, like it's exciting, let's do it. I finally found work I love, like, yes, yes, yes. And actually, I really want to use this period to pause and to just tune in and check in, like, okay, am I still in alignment? Which direction am I going in next? What can I do to nourish myself? And then pick it up again, but hopefully in a slower pace, in a more feeling, intuitive, flowing pace.
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I really feel that as well. I think it's just like it's a constant, not constant, but regular need of checking up with us and actually checking if are we in alignment and can we continue down this path or not. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And Yeah, I would really love to, because I know service is very important to you, and you do say that service is what matters at the end, not at the cost of ourselves, but service is what matters. And I really like this idea because, and again, sharing a piece of my story. One of the things I thought to myself was, okay, I want to survive this. I want to be alive. I want to live. But at the same time, for what do I want to be alive? Just because I want to be alive, or do I want to make a difference? What's the purpose here? And I would love you to just talk about service and how also cancer survivors can actually think about being of service after being in resting mode for a while.
It's an interesting term, service, because it can sound like work. Like it can, you almost think, oh, it must mean work. What work am I putting out? What output am I putting into the world? But I really feel it can also be just sharing your wisdom with other people going through the experience. I know personally there was a lady in Australia who had stage 4 melanoma at the time I had cancer, and she had gone into remission. And once I found her, she felt like a lifeline, kind of
Mm,
this hope that, oh, maybe there's a chance that I won't die straight away. Like, obviously, I'd been given such a poor prognosis at that point. And I really don't think she realizes that. And I mean, I did email her several times to tell her, but just what a huge impact that had on me and how helpful it was to know there was someone in the world who had survived and she was similar age to me. So in that way, it can be service. It doesn't have to be a grand, huge thing. You don't have to set up an organization or make it your life's work, but it can be small acts of kindness, really, I guess. And it's interesting, there's a lady, Bonnie Ware, who is a palliative care nurse, and she asks people the she put together the top 5 regrets of the dying. I don't know if you've heard this, but one of them is, I wish I hadn't worked so much. And I think that's such a good message. It's like so many of us, we do go so deep into work, and it can be wonderful, and work's an important part of life. But I know for myself, feel very grateful to have found work that doesn't actually feel like work. It does feel like I'm being of service, and I found the thing that actually I'm meant to be doing, and it's all thanks to this huge journey I've gone on, really. But it doesn't have to be huge. It can be small acts of service as well. And
yeah.
I think the key is just coming back to yourself, like checking in and making sure that you're not giving so much that you end up feeling depleted as well. We can't be from an empty cup. We know that.
Yeah, beautiful. Lauren, as we come to the end of this conversation, is there anything you would like to leave us with? Something you didn't touch on and you would like to, or a message, anything you would like?
Oh my gosh, so much to say. What's coming through right now actually is a friend of mine died earlier, well, last year now, Chris Hallinger, who you may know of. She had a really successful Instagram account called How to Glitter a Turd, and she wrote a book of the same name. And she was just such a beautiful, sparkly light. And we met very early on when we both had cancer, similar ages. She'd been living with breast cancer for many years and really defied the odds and lived for so much longer than was expected. And just the way that she lived with cancer, I think was really inspiring. I know we've just kind of closed our conversation talking about survivorship and going into remission, but just to say to anybody who is listening, but who isn't there and is still living with active disease, that actually you can still live a rich and beautiful life. And Chris was a real testament to that. It was amazing to watch her really shine, and she just touched the lives of so many people that, being of service, that legacy piece, like she really, really did that. And what I thought was so amazing is shortly before she died, she actually held her own funeral. So funeral, funeral. And I got to go to it, and it was just so wonderful to watch her there at her own funeral, the celebration of her life. And it really comes down to, there's a quote, isn't there? It's like, not, I'm going to paraphrase this really badly, but it's not how many years you live, but it's like how much life is in your years. And that's just so beautiful, such a beautiful way to kind of live and just try and embrace every day as if it was your last. And we are all terminal, whether we do have pets or not. And I think just a daily reminder of mortality, rather not dwelling on it, but just waking up and realizing, whether I have days, weeks, months, years to live, like what a gift this sunrise is today.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lauren, for coming on the podcast. I love reading. Yes, and thank you so much for to all the people listening. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you.